Welcome, everyone. It is 9 o'clock, so we are going to get going. We are talking today about districttools.org and the two surveys that are available on this website. Really appreciate you being with us today, and this is being recorded, and later on today or early tomorrow, I will be sending out the recording to everyone who registered for this webinar. We will also use snippets of the recording on the District Tools website to provide some of those guidelines for how you use this website and the measures that are available on it. I want to start out by thanking the Kansas State Department of Education. They funded the bill for the development of districttools.org. The tools within it were created in collaboration with Kansas MTSS and Alignment and the Kansas Parent Information Resource Center, or KPIRC. So we're going to talk a little bit today, starting out about the tools themselves, and then we will go into how to administer and use the website. For questions today, you are welcome to use the chat if you would like, but we have also created a Padlet for you that will organize the questions about general questions about the website, about each of these measures, and other types of measures that would be beneficial to have on this website in order to facilitate local level decision making. I am Amy Gomer Erickson. I lead the TASN evaluation team, and our role is to support all of the TASN projects in supporting schools, districts, educators, families, as they build capacity to implement evidence-based practices. If you would like it, the auto transcript is on, so each of you are able to go in and turn that on if that is beneficial to you. Just a little tiny background on TASN. TASN is the technical assistance arm for KSDE's special education and title services. You can learn a lot about TASN by going to the website, same one you used to register for this training. And if you click on TASN projects, you can get an overview of each of the projects. TASN evaluation, which I said is my team, has its own page. You can find all the contact information for everyone who is on my team. This is also where you can find evaluation briefs for each of the projects. And later on today, I'll tell you just a little bit about how those evaluation briefs come about and how the data on this website informs them. So let's talk just briefly about the measures themselves. So everybody should be seeing a PowerPoint slide with a QR code that also goes to that Padlet, a place where you can just post your questions anonymously, and we will try to get those answered by the end of our time together today. If not, I will send out an email in the email to everyone that comes out later on today or tomorrow with the video link. I will also answer some frequently asked questions. So this website was designed to take us, evaluation, professional development providers, others, out of the data use loop. So originally, these measures were things that districts would collect on paper or through a survey like SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics, some sort of survey website. And then that information would only be accessible to whoever created the survey, someone like me. And so then I would have to analyze that data, create reports for it, and send it back to the district. Now, I don't mind analyzing data and creating reports, but the turnaround time was too long. Any turnaround time really is too long. Those who need the data in their hands need it in their hands in real time. And so we created this website which is hard programmed, which means it took some programming dollars and expense and is able to be updated to meet the needs of multiple stakeholders. So in collaboration with both the TASM projects I've mentioned and the Kansas State Department of Education, design this specifically to support districts and schools in their own decision-making. So let's talk just briefly about these measures. The first one, the Inclusive MTSS Implementation Scale, often referred to as the IMIS. This is a measure that is completed by instructional staff and administrators within a school. It evaluates the school's tiered framework and organizes the data into domains including reading, math, behavioral, social, emotional learning, as well as looking at those structures for collaboration and leadership teaming. The results can be compared across time, as it says on the website, as well as disaggregated by school or role. And ideally, it's completed once a year by all instructional staff. Now, this was developed in collaboration with Kansas MTSS and alignment to support schools that they were working with to evaluate those structures annually and to design implementation plans based on that data. But you do not have to be working with Kansas MTSS and alignment to use the survey or to find the data valuable. These structures aren't unique to only being valuable if you're working with Kansas MTSS and alignment. These are structures that can support all school districts in really thinking about the level of implementation across those domains. And so I want to share just a little bit from that survey. There are 20 items focused on reading that look at administrative support, the core effectiveness of the core, inclusion of all students, as well as the effectiveness of how students are placed into, monitored, and make progress within interventions. The same is accurate in the area of math. Again, 20 items, very comparable. And then behavioral, social, emotional learning. This report that I'm showing here on the screen is the technical guide that is available on districttools.org. All items within this measure are provided in that technical guide, as well as all of the directions for how to administer the survey, how to analyze the results, how to see that data. This survey takes approximately 10 minutes for instructional staff to complete. It uses logic so that only educators who are teaching reading answer the reading questions. Math makes sense that way. Administrators also complete this survey, and their items are slightly different from those for instructional staff. The Family Engagement Survey is designed to capture data from families. Currently, version 2 is our recommendation. This version was released about a month ago, and it has stronger two-way communication items, as well as the addition of demographic variables within the survey. This survey can be sent to all families, and they can complete it in the variety of languages that you see on the screen. The data is organized around the national PTA standards, which are in the domains of welcoming environment, effective communication, supporting student learning, sharing power and advocacy, and community involvement. So when you view these results, you're able to see the data by domain as well as item level data. Again, this one can be disaggregated looking at specific schools or some of the demographic data provided on the survey. And again, this survey is one that has all of the items listed and the directions in the technical guide, which is available on districttools.org. And at the very end of the technical guide, you can get to a PDF version for every language for this survey. This one is pretty fast for families to complete. There are 20 items and then a few demographic items at the end, as well as an open-ended item for suggestions that they have for increasing family engagement. Schools and districts who have used these surveys have found them to be beneficial. We've conducted focus groups and interviews, as well as asked for feedback regarding the use of the data. And beneficial in ways to improve their systems, to celebrate progress that has been made, to look at strengths, to report and use as evidence within the KISA accreditation process, and to use as evidence within the STAR recognition system. So many ways that schools and districts have used this data. So I want to turn it over now to Jennifer Gatz, who is the Assistant Superintendent in Prairie Hills. And her district has been using both of these surveys, and particularly the IMIS, the Inclusive MTSS Implementation Scale. So I wanted to ask her for her perspective on how her district and school leadership teams and collaborative teams use this data to support their processes. Welcome, Jennifer.
Well, thank you, Amy. I'm excited to learn about the Family Engagement Survey version 2, because we've used the Family Engagement Survey in the past, but we didn't use it this year. And I'm interested in digging into that a little bit more. So I'm excited to hear about that. But we have used the Family Engagement Survey in the past, but we've consistently used the IMIS. We did work with TASN and revise our MTSS program. Oh gosh, 5 years ago, I believe. And the last 4 years, we have used the IMIS survey. We give it here in the springtime. Right about this time, actually, we gave our teachers time at our PLC a couple of weeks ago to fill out the IMIS. And then we use that survey as part of our KISA accreditation process to support our growth through MTSS. So, when you're doing the reporting there, we went through year 5 last year. And one of our goal areas was related to restructuring our MTSS processes. And so we use that IMIS data as qualitative survey data from our teachers to demonstrate the growth that we've made in the implementation of MTSS. And then our building and district leadership teams use that information to determine, what should be our area of focus, where are we maybe struggling. And we've seen that we've done really well with reading. And with the dyslexia initiative and the work we've done in the area of reading, that has consistently been a strength for us. And then in math and behavior, we know we need some work. Behavior has been kind of our last thing to come along as far as our work with interventions and implementation of interventions. So this data gives us information that we can use to help us plan for the future. We use it to look at our PD plan and determine what are our next steps in meeting the needs of our teachers and also our classified staff that work with, we call them instructional support staff, but paras, they take the survey as well. And so we look at that information and utilize the reports to have conversations with our teams to see how we can improve.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. And that really is the whole purpose of the IMIS. Is to support that decision-making, to help you look at your growth over time and pinpoint areas to focus on.
Are you going to show any of the reports, Amy? I'm sure that's probably.
That is up to you. It is your district's data, so you have to say, I can show it.
that you're fine to show it. I just wondered, because I do think the reports are very interesting. And Amy, what I like is, as you know, that they continue to evaluate, what are the reports? Are they useful or not? How can we make improvements? And there's new reports even that Amy shared with me that I think will be really interesting for our district to use in the future. So I do think it would be valuable for people to see the reports and see. We look at them by building, but we can also pull them out and look at them by district.
Mhm. Exactly. And are you seeing the snapshot report now?
Yes, this is the new one that we did not have previously that I think will be really useful. Because what we were doing is we were going in and kind of choosing specific questions to focus on for our growth measures for our KISA plan. With this one, you're getting kind of a more overall picture, which I think will be really useful.
Yes, and so do we. This is the newest report that will be available on District Tools here within the next couple weeks. So anyone who is using the IMIS this spring or has in the past will have access to this level of a report. And we're calling this a snapshot. So it doesn't provide the data on every single item, but it shows which items are used to create these aggregates. And the percentage here is the percentage of items in that domain for everyone who responded that are at a strongly agree or agree level. So if you think about that, it's kind of that percentage of implementation. It is the feedback from all instructional staff on how well those components are in place. And we've used some color coding on this report that matches color coding that Kansas MTSS and Alignment is using in other reports, such as the Communities That Care climate types report. And it really just allows your eyes to pinpoint those strengths as well as that progress over time and determine where to focus additional effort. And I want to recognize your district, Jennifer, for the work that you have done across years that has really shown growth in this implementation data.
And as I said, when we think about, okay, where do we go next? We need to sustain, our goal was to make this a part of what we do and not something additional. But the area that you can see, it's glaring at you that we've already identified for our next cycle to work on is that behavior, social, emotional intervention piece. And, and the data definitely supports that. And so we have that data to use as part of our needs assessment here as we start. This is our year one. And then, we'll look at that and have this data to carry through that 5-year cycle to see if what we're implementing does have an impact on teacher perception. And then also then we can look at other forms of data. We use our Kansas Communities That Cares data to look at the student as well. So kind of having both, I think that's really important to have both viewpoints, not just for the teacher viewpoint, not just the teacher or not just the student data, but we can use that and other data to look at from multiple perspectives.
Exactly. That triangulation of data is so important. And many districts have found that using the family engagement survey in conjunction with the inclusive MTSS implementation scale also supports that decision making. As you can see, the bottom domain here is family engagement. This is family engagement from the perspective of instructional staff. Do staff feel that they are engaging families effectively? And there's items within the IMIS in reading, math, as well as behavioral, social, emotional. The items state things like data are shared with families regarding their child's math progress, and families are informed of their child's need for and placement into math interventions. Comparable items in those other areas as well.
And one of the things that I like about this survey as well, at the very beginning, it has teachers and staff members, instructional staff, identify their role. So are they instructional? Are they teachers? Are they support staff? Do they do tier 1? Do they work with tier 2 or tier 3? Are they on the BLT? So that I like that part as well, is that it accounts for the different roles within the staff in our district.
Fantastic point. And then being able to disaggregate the data by those roles. Are we supporting all of our instructional staff to the degree that they need in order to effectively implement these practices?
And are we communicating effectively? Because if you want, we don't want this just to be just our reading staff, just our math staff. Are we communicating effectively with all staff so that all staff have some ownership in it as well?
Fantastic point. One of the reasons this is a measure completed by all staff, so a population measure, instead of being a rubric type measure that is often completed just by a building or district leadership team, is we have found in our research, as have others, that often the people involved in the planning, so your building leadership team people, believe implementation is stronger than staff across the board are actually implementing. And that makes sense. You're highly involved. You're actually doing so much of the work. You assume everyone else is implementing to the same degree that you are. And so an advantage of this survey is that you're able to actually see that. And you can even look at the data for people who aren't on the building or district leadership teams versus those who are. So just a reminder that you are welcome to use that QR code or to follow the link to the Padlet that's in the chat in order to ask additional questions for Jennifer, myself, about the MTSS implementation scale. Jane Groff, I'd like to invite you now to share a little bit more about the Family Engagement Survey, maybe specifically version 2, and how you've worked with districts and schools to use the data.
Happy to. Thank you, Amy. At the beginning, Amy said she wanted to thank KSDE for the funding of being able to host this, do this site. And at the same time, I want to thank the TAS and evaluation team, because they are the designers, the ones who run this site, that make it happen. And their expertise is second to none. I so value our TAS and evaluation team. And as I talk with other states, they can't believe that we have this statewide site, and other states have tapped into this site also. But so again, thanks to Amy and her team for really leading the way on this. One of the things is that we all know in family engagement, getting good data from families is difficult. I've been in this position for 15 years, but research on family engagement has been 50 years old. And it's always been rather difficult to get good data from families. Normally, the normal thing that would happen in Title I reports or any reports would be counting heads. So you would count how many heads, how many parents showed up either at conferences or special events. And, that's one way to do it. And we will probably always need to and keep track of that. But the first family engagement survey and this family engagement survey are much more meaningful in their data, because they are based on the 6 national PTA family school partnership standards. So things like the welcoming, communicating, supporting student learning, sharing power, advocacy, and community relationships. So it's not randomly built. It is built around and on those standards. It's piloted. It goes through all the processes that it needs to go through. And again, TAS and evaluation make sure it's a reliable and very valid survey. So I value so much their expertise on that. And you can see the first question I just presented on this in Louisiana a week ago is, Jane, is it in any languages? And they were very happy to hear Spanish, Vietnamese, Arabic, Chinese, or Swahili, the top 5 languages in Kansas. So as Amy mentioned before, what a great tool. Many times schools or districts will say, Jane, I really don't have data on family engagement. I don't have anything other than counting some heads or percentages at parent-teacher conferences, things like that. So it's difficult to set goals from no data. You can just kind of pick and choose. But this provides data from families on these particular areas that can inform your KISA goals, your STAR, working towards STAR recognition, your Title I reports, and any federal monies, any federal grants, always ask about an family engagement piece. And to be able to say, we give a statewide, it's a family engagement survey. These are our ratings in the area of welcoming, communicating, et cetera, et cetera. We saw a need in the area of communication with families. And so we are focusing on this area, and these are our strategies or goals, and these are our strategies. So, and Amy will show us where it's at on the site and everything. But the neat thing about this family engagement survey too, that one did not have, one had no demographics. It had standards, but it had no demographics. And the beautiful way that TAS and evaluation set this up is that no family can ever be identified. And Amy will talk to you about that, because of a certain number that need to answer these demographics before that data is considered and used. So it's very protective, and we all want that. We all need that for the families in our schools. And so, Amy, for example, stay right here for a minute. Let's look at these demographics. So that first one there you see is special education services. Yes, no, and unsure. That next box is, do you have a suggestion on how the school can better engage and support your family? So maybe a certain family needs to know, I need mental health support or services. And we can hear that, figure that out, reach out, or look at that as a staff. And then on down, we get our race, ethnicities, and you can see all of those. And then I think there's one below that, right, Amy? Maybe 2. Does your family speak languages other than English in your home? And does your family qualify for free and reduced lunch rates? So we can identify families that have households with low income and families that have other languages than English in their home. So Amy, if you'll go to the top of that survey, I would just like to give an example. This is one of my favorite statements, is number 3. I love that. I feel my child is valued and cared for in this school. The old survey, for example, standard 1 is welcoming. And of course, that's up in question statement 1. We want to know, do they feel welcome? But we said that's not enough. That's not enough. The number 1 reasons families say that they send their children to private schools is because they feel that they will care for their children more. Well, let's make sure that our school and district, that the families in our school and districts feel that their child is valued and cared for. So we went deeper, for example, on that standard one, welcoming, that you could look at that statement and you could say, what did our families say with students with disabilities? Did they feel that their child is valued and cared for? Or the families that speak languages other than English as a first language in their home, did they say they felt that their children were valued and cared for? Or what's our comparison with families that live within homes with low income compared to those that's not in families of low income? What was that comparison or so about? Did they feel valued and cared for in the school? So you can see the value in the demographics, the protective demographics, and what information a school and or district can get from being able to apply those. So Amy, if you'll go down just a little bit to number 9, which is a great one that wasn't in the other survey. Teachers contact me to tell me positive things about my child. Is that true for families of children with disabilities? Is it true for families living within families of low income, et cetera, et cetera? It's really a beautiful thing. And boy, talk about being able to help you set specific goals and strategies. Much more helpful than the first survey. The first survey got our statements out there and they got our standards out there. And now we went even more deeper. And then even number 14, a social emotional statement on number 14 that says, school staff encourage me to share concerns about my child's academic, social, and emotional well-being. So it isn't just academics, but now, which wasn't in the other survey, we go a little bit more into social and emotional well-being. And for our KISA goals, we all have to, we may choose supporting social emotional learning, measuring that. And this could be a measure that we say, this is what our families tell us. This is what they've told us, that they feel like we strongly encourage them to share concerns about academic, social, emotional well-being. Or this is why we have a goal to share more about social, emotional well-being, because we scored lower here than we wanted to, and that we think is important. So we're setting a goal or a strategy, in particular in the social emotional state board outcome. And here's a piece of data to support that. So those are just some examples that I have. And when I'm out there working with schools, you're hearing a bit of my presentation, because this is the way we approach it. And the one other thing that's important as school leaders is to have your teachers take this survey before it ever goes out, or before, so they should know it's going out, and have your teachers become familiar with this survey so they understand what it is that's going out, what it's built upon, and the reports that will come back from the data from families, because we want instructional staff to know what is going out, what families will be thinking about as they're answering this survey. So, and the beautiful thing about the IMIS, the first survey for instructional staff, is that family engagement component that's in it too. Because let's just say that instructional staff felt very strongly we are sharing data with families about reading or math or social emotional. But maybe some of the data that came back from our family engagement survey informs you in a different way. You can see that family engagement down there at the bottom. And good growth for Jennifer. Good growth, Jennifer. Is it Prairie Hills or Prairie? Good growth. Of course, I noticed that in family engagement. And, sometimes just I thought about you, Jennifer, and your staff, and learned that 53% just beginning. And then you learn from your survey, okay, we need to inform families about reading and math and social emotional learning data. And families need to get that data. And in learning from that survey, look at the jump. I mean, the jump was big, 53 to 79. Because I'm convinced your instructional staff went, wow, okay, let's communicate more. Let's communicate data more with our families. And then I think you get an automatic jump from the learning that happens. Jennifer, yes, you got something to say.
Well, I was just going to say, then we started including, because we were communicating with parents through that of students that maybe were needing tier intervention services, but then we also started communicating our assessment results, not state assessments, but our FastBridge, our screening assessments with our report cards. And so teachers were reviewing that at parent-teacher conferences with report cards. And I think that's one of the, it jumped really, because that was something easy that we could do and it was visible. So.
Beautiful. I love hearing that, Jennifer. Years ago, my emphasis really was share data with families, share data with families. So I love hearing what you've done. And it's obvious in your data there. And I hope that our new family engagement survey really helps you in breaking down into the demographics, alignment with those standards, and that you'll even find even more value in the survey. So, Amy, I'm ready for you to show these tools and do your thing.
Thank you so much, Jane. A question was asked in the chat on when to administer the IMIS, but let's answer it for the family engagement survey too. Both of these need to be administered far enough into the school year that people have had the opportunity to experience either the family engagement or those tiered structures. So as Jennifer said, they administer theirs toward the end of the third quarter. This is a pretty common administration time. And I know they're working on their administration of the IMIS right now, and will have that data available for that planning for next school year and at the end of this school year. For the family engagement survey, it's about the same timeline. Fall parent-teacher conferences is often a little too early for families to really provide their full perspective around family engagement. And so for most districts, they are administering the family engagement survey in the spring semester at some point, often in conjunction with spring parent-teacher conferences. Another important key with the family engagement survey is the very first question on it asks, which school are you going to provide feedback on? So which school do you have a child in? And then after they take those 20 items, it asks, do you have a child in another school in this district? If so, choose that school and take the survey again. That way, all of the information can be captured at once, and the parent or family member does not have to access the survey multiple times for each of the schools that their children are in. So let's get a little bit into the mechanics of administration. So I am on the main page of districttools.org. And here you can find the links to those documents, the technical guides that provide lots of information about the Family Engagement Survey and the Inclusive MTSS implementation scale, including reliability and validity data. Then if it's your first time here, your district doesn't already have someone that you know has access to the site, you need to go through the request access. This just sends the evaluation team an email with your email address and information, and we connect you to the correct school district. This is validated using that email address. So make sure you use your school email address. If you are not associated with the school or district right now, you can request access anyway, and I will give you access to our example district. That's what I'm going to be showing you today. Once you have access, you can log in, and that will take you to your district dashboard page. So this is the example district dashboard. You are all welcome to play around in this and request access to it. When you have access, you can invite additional people from your district. So this takes us out of the loop. You click invite members, you put in their email address, it sends them an email saying, come join. And the login information is uses the same login as the TASN website. So you don't have to remember two different logins. As long as you have that login information, you can get into this site as well. The two sites are connected through the programming. This is also where you can manage the members. Say you have someone who left your school district and you don't want them to have access anymore. You just click the X. It says, are you sure you want to delete this person? You say yes. The next thing you need to set up is your buildings. So this area starts out blank. So you get to add your buildings with your building names. There was some debate about this, but it was decided that if you name your buildings, then it will be named in a way that the families and educators know those buildings by. So if you have a junior high, high school, kind of one physical building perhaps, but you want to put them in here as two separate schools, that completely makes sense. If you have an early childhood program that you want to include as a separate school in order to gather that feedback, that makes sense as well. We recommend that you enter all of your buildings here, because when you administer a survey, either of the surveys, people do have to select which building they are in, or whether they're answering for the entire district at once on the inclusive MTSS just implementation scale. Okay, so that gets you access here to the dashboard. Then you can create a new survey. That just means you are ready to launch a survey. You are going to choose from the surveys. As I said, we're focusing here today on the Family Engagement Survey version 2. We do still have version 1 available on the website for use if you are partway through your KISA process and you want to make sure you can compare data from prior years. You can continue to use version 1 for this year and next year. And at some point, we will sunset that survey. Then you get to create an additional, your own unique URL. For example, here I have example IMIS 2022. This just makes that link a little bit easier for you to share with others. You can also decide which buildings to include. For the most part, we recommend that you include all buildings for both surveys, and then your one link works for everybody, because on the website, you are able to disaggregate by those roles and by building. If there are some questions that you really want to have answered that are not in either of these surveys, you can link to additional items through a Google form or SurveyMonkey, some survey that you have created. And so that it goes right here with this additional questions. So just trying to make it so you're not having to send out 2 different surveys. If there's just a few more questions you want to ask, go ahead and put it here. You will not be able to connect this data to that demographic data, either the educator's role or those family demographics, because they are 2 separate surveys. But it will allow you to add questions like, what is the best time of day for parent-teacher conferences in general? Or would you be interested, would a family night training be something that would interest you? Examples along those lines. It is still completely anonymous there. So keep that in mind too. If you actually want to know a parent's specific answers, then asking it in a way that is not anonymous will be important. And as Jane said, in the survey responses, we have set it up so you are not able to disaggregate the data unless you have enough survey responses that that anonymity can be maintained. So then, let me go back to this page really quickly. Then you have all of your surveys listed here when you first opened it. That means the date you created it. You can close it if you are done collecting data for that administration, typically that school year. Here is your snapshot of how many responses you have to this survey. And then when you click on the survey itself, you get into that survey report page. It always takes you to the report page because it builds in real time. So it will add in additional responses as it goes. This is also where you get that share link and you can access it at any time. So as I said, example IMIS 2022, and I'm going to share that link and an example link within the chat. So if you would like to, you can actually take these surveys and see how it feels. One important thing to note here is this really supports you in making sure that you're getting responses from a strong sample. Ideally, everyone, we have a lot of districts that will ask everyone to complete the IMIS as part of an in-service day or in preparation for some sort of data review so that the data is actually used really in that quick turnaround time. Another thing that you are able to do from here is identify whether you need to reach out to any groups again. So in this example, there have been 5 responses from the high school, 1 response from the elementary, and all of those responses are general education teachers. So clearly, if this were my school, I'd do a little follow-up to some other groups, reaching out to them. Then you can see every single item within this report. For the family engagement survey, very similar. Here you can have your share link, number of total responses is here, and then you have your summarized report looking at those domains and then each item. Remember, this is example district. None of this data is real, so don't make judgments off of it. But you are able then to look at each specific item. We conducted focus groups using with districts, leadership teams who had used the IMIS or the family engagement survey for 2 years, and asking them whether the data was actionable, whether they were able to make changes that they believed made a difference in the following year's data. And the results were overwhelmingly yes, that they felt like they were able to take specific actions and were able to name what those actions were based on this data. And then the next year's data was stronger, more positive, directly related to those actions they took. This is also where you can get into some of those filters. So here I can look at the filters of special education, race, ethnicity, free reduced lunch, other languages in the home. And in order to ensure that these are anonymous, the data will not graph or report unless there are at least 5 responses. This goes for both the inclusive MTSS implementation scale and the family engagement survey. Here you can also look at the entire district or any of your schools. And again, we have in the composite the number of responses by school here. Another important thing to note on the family engagement survey, we not only made it so that families can take the survey in their preferred language, but you can also download the report in each of those languages. So making sure you're able to share that data back with families. Then if we go back 1 page to that main page, here also we can create some customized reports that look at data comparing groups or comparing administrations across multiple years. As soon as we have the snapshot for the IMIS finalized, this is where that report also will be housed. And so it really becomes that customization option for you. Another new addition for the family engagement survey is that there is now an open-ended item. So you are able to download those open-ended responses. More languages coming is a great question. Yes, not for this school year, but our plan next school year, we have the list of the most common languages in Kansas. We are at 6 right now in our translations, English plus 5 more, and would like to get up to the full 10 top languages in Kansas. Another thing that we can potentially do if we can't get it all on the website is create those PDF versions, the paper copies in additional languages. Going through some of the questions that are being asked in the chat here. Are responses anonymous? Yes. How are the surveys shared with parents? This is a really good question that's done a few different ways. All of the examples you gave, Roger, are actual examples. Email from your internal system. You have the link right here. However you get that out works. In a newsletter can work. Link to PowerSchool. Many districts use it in association with the parent-teacher conferences, and in some instances have a QR code as you walk in, or have a bank of computers and say, please take just a moment and complete this survey. Some complete for some groups of parents on paper, but remember, if it's completed on paper and they hand you the paper, it's no longer anonymous. And then they enter that information into the system so it can be added to everyone else's information. I'm going to pause here for a second and give you guys just a moment to reflect, ask questions in the chat, go to the Padlet and ask any questions there. I'm going to look at that in just a second. And I'm going to glance at my notes and try to remember all the things I forgot to say today. So reflect just for a moment. What questions do you have?
Amy, on your screen there, can you scroll down a little bit? Do you have some, is there some data on that one?
Yes, there is.
Oh, you're on the, if you go to the IMIS, do you have data on there?
A little bit.
A little bit. So we look at this and each of them are broken up into the reading, math, and behavior. And, you know, we can glance at it really quickly and see how much of the darker brown or the light brown we have compared to the green and the white. And then when we look at this data, you know, we can pull out specific questions where we are seeing more, you know, it's kind of hard to see on hers because of the because of the just, demo
Fake
data
data.
that she has.
Right.
But it is very clear to see and to look at. And then that you can also do a comparison or report that'll show the 3 years together at a quick glance, which is very helpful as well.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, and our goal is that you have all of the data in your hands. So here you have every single item. You can get a sense of how many people responded and said that they provide instruction or reinforcement in each of the areas. And this dummy data doesn't show that variability, but any district's report does. So another question that was asked on the Padlet is how many responses should a district aim for? A certain percentage. Now, a survey, let's go with the research world. The research world says that in a survey such as garnering input from families, a 10% response rate is pretty common. A 30% response rate is good for decision making. What we are finding in Kansas data is that the response rate is substantially higher than that. It is hard to determine a complete response rate because a mother who has 2 children in the same school is only going to answer the survey for that school once. And now say the father also answers. Fantastic, you have more data, but now you have 2 data points from one family and potentially no data points from another family. So figuring out a true response rate is difficult, but the general rule of thumb is, do you feel like you have enough responses from the range of demographics in your school to make some informed decisions? So for the most part, all data is good data, but understanding and the big advantage of the family engagement survey too, being able to know those demographics, that can be very valuable in determining whether you're able to make overarching decisions based on that data. So for the family engagement survey in particular, it could be completed more than once by a parent or guardian. But if you are a parent or guardian, you probably don't complete it more than once, especially if it is sent out multiple ways, but in the same time span. So you wouldn't want to necessarily send it out in December one way and in February another way. You probably would get some duplication there. So think of a smaller window of time. And it is possible that non-parents could answer. So you can be cognizant about who the survey goes to and how you disseminate the information about the family engagement survey. Often it is sent directly to those who are in, that student contact. So might be through your Power School or other mechanisms that you use to have direct communication with families. The inclusive MTSS implementation scale, that is usually sent via email from a school or district administrator to everyone in the school who is providing instruction, and that administrator also completes the survey. We recommend that when sharing that survey, that how the data will be reported back is also shared. All of these reports are able to be downloaded as a PDF and used for that action planning and decision making. I hope this has been helpful. If you have other questions, on the main page of districttools.org, as well as on the snapshot pages, The contact information for the TASN evaluation is at the bottom. You are welcome to use that email to ask any questions. In the event for today, my email address was given. Regardless of how you contact me, tasneval@ku.edu or agomer@ku.edu. I will respond to any additional questions you have. I appreciate all of your time today, and you are welcome to stay on and ask additional questions, but it is 10 o'clock, and I know many of you also have other meetings to get to. Thank you very much, and thank you, Jennifer and Jane. Appreciate so much your engagement.